prosecution of felon gangster mafiotic negroidic the Black Frank Gelada, a gangster judge, therefore unprosecutable. The blackish, menial, negroidic in appearance and demeanor, felon, vicious, parroting puppet, ex-district attorney Nassau County with no private law experience, detested by all factions, in spite of this solely because of his many-year secret gangsterization and crucifixion of me, this negroidic, low, mafiotic, deadly Black Frank Gelada was then immediately and unprecedentedly and repeatedly, rapidly promoted in spite of tremendous opposition to the present position of second highest state judgeship solely through gangster computer god manipulation. As additional evidence, during the last week of my within-mentioned month-long, worse than a farce Nazi court criminal trial in Nassau County Court, 1958, where dwarfed felon gangster parroting puppet rectum lapper sodomist Judge William Sullivan's ball of fat felon slut wife, she, as planned, sat in the front row, repeatedly stripping her overclothes and completely pulling up her dress and slip and pulling aside her old-fashioned pink bloomers in order to display her anus, her conch. She repeatedly gesticulated and whispered, "I'll give it to you to suck. Finish him." Her husband's dwarfed felon gangster parroting puppet rectum lapper sodomist Judge William Sullivan, flushed-faced in repeated open sodomistic displays, stuck out his tongue, wiggling it, chuckling to her. "You hangman rope gangster felon parroting puppet scum on top playboys can watch my Frankenstein eyesight television playback of this felonious lowly sodomistic display by the felon sodomist Judge William Sullivan and his lowly felon slut wife during my trial in Nassau County Court. After my worse than Nazi court criminal conviction, crucifixion, for years in poverty I suffered hopeless, jobless, character assassination, and isolation in this low, deadly nigger town. I was the repeat target victim of this gangster government's gangsterization and undetectable extermination attempts to shut me up forever with my secrets. Then, in December 14th to 17th, 1965, I attempted to escape this worst mongrel gangster communist country to return to the Slovenic Polish land of my forefathers. Instead, in a gangster-staged parroting puppet deadly conspiracy, I was flown from Kennedy, New York Airport at night to a small distant St. Lawrence River estuary, snowbound small airport under the guise that I was in Warsaw, Poland. Immediately, many, many things proved this to me, including the two big white asbestos shingled hangars with the large Braniff Airways signs on their sidewalls, in addition to the many blurted statements I solicited from the many CIA deadly gangsters, the assassins of me, the many, many parroting puppets all around me. I demanded an immediate flight back to Kennedy, New York Airport. Instead, I was held...
It's not. It's not. Dwarf. Dwarf. We want to be called dwarves. Call us dwarves. How you guys doing this evening? Oh, I forgot to change the Valentine's background. Just a black beating heart. That's okay. That's okay. We can have that. We can have that. It's actually not too bad. It doesn't say Valentine's Day on it, so maybe that's just a normal background. Maybe I need to start changing up the backgrounds. A little swirly thing starting to get a little hypnotic anyway, right? So maybe we need to have some variety. Mix it up a little bit. Hope you guys are having a good time. Hope you guys are surviving the storm. I'm getting a little affected by the storm, not like a lot of people. My ham antenna got knocked down by the storm. The storm that's still kind of raging, like a lot of high winds here, which is normal for the desert when there's extreme weather. Usually it comes with wind because there's nothing to, well, get in the way of the wind, except for my ham radio antenna. So in this case, it's actually it wasn't a huge deal. I kind of was expecting it to happen. I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did because I didn't have any guy wires on it. It was just one of these, you can get these military surplus fiberglass tent poles. They're actually really good for antennas. It was about 32 feet up with no guy wires. Because it wasn't really holding a lot of weight, and it was not a big deal. And every time there'd be a big windstorm, I'd see it just like, creaking back and forth. And just like, I knew one of these days, and one of those days was the other day. So snapped in half, collapsed all over the place. Not a big deal though. I have a replacement piece that I can just put in there. And I have guy wires on the way. They were supposed to be here, but I guess the crazy weather is slowing them down. But I guess there's rolling blackouts. I've had a little bit of that. Had my power go out. I've had my internet go out. I was actually kind of crossing my fingers, hoping that we would have internet tonight. Seems to be holding up so far, which is good. But there has been a little bit of, rotting infrastructure to reflect the third world country that we live in. So it is to be expected. People freaking out all over the place about, I live in Texas. I don't even have a heater. And now it's below freezing or whatever it is in parts of Texas where they're getting lots of snow. Someone said something like 70% of the United States, or at least the lower 48, is covered in snow. It's global warming for you. When it's unusually hot, that's global warming. When it's unusually cold, it's global warming, because there's climate change. Anything that changes in the climate is due to man-made emissions, which has yet to be proven adequately to me. But anyway, moving right along, one of the big polluters, one of the reasons, in fact, that all these climate accords really only serve to punish the United States economically and not so much help the environments at all. One of the biggest polluters is China, who does not give a fuck. See, what we're seeing in China, and one of the reasons why people have been predicting that China would overtake the United States, well, for decades. And I still remember snooty little lefties a few years ago, maybe more than a few years ago, probably about 10 years ago, when people first started to sound the alarm about the rise of China, the economic powerhouse that China was going to become. And all these snooty little leftists saying like, oh, you're just fear-mongering. They're never going to overtake us. They don't have the same innovation that we have. They're just, most of China, it's largely agrarian. It's just, they're not going to, so much of that landmass is just a bunch of peasants, and they're building these cities with no one that lives in them. And it's just, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because China doesn't fuck around. China doesn't fuck around with woke shit. China doesn't fuck around when it comes to Chinese primacy, which we're going to get into in a second. But as of, I guess, 2020, China has overtaken the U.S. as the EU's top trade partner. So more commerce is taking place between the EU and China than between the EU and the United States. And I guess this is a tipping point of sorts. And it's only going to increase from here. Now, this is also why you see it's kind of funny, because the capitalists at the top of the hierarchy, they see what's happening. I mean, they're not stupid. They know this. They've known this was coming just as much as anyone knew this was coming, right? But they can't at least vocalize the real reasons why it's happening. So instead, they say, oh, well, it's because, well, of course, China is overtaking the West economically because they're communists. Of course. The solution isn't to examine any of the cultural differences or the demographic differences. Definitely not the demographic differences. The solution is to examine the differences in their form of government, and maybe we can try to emulate what they've got going on there with the social credit score and all this sort of thing. When reality is, it really is just as simple. Is the Chinese believe in Chinese primacy. Chinese primacy. Now, I talked about, I think it was the last stream, where the left will say something like, being on time. Being on time is white supremacy. Being on time is white supremacy, and we need to erase white supremacy, so apparently punctuality will no longer be important. And the response that the right has is to throw their hands up in the air and go, oh, you're crazy, you're crazy. That's not white supremacy. That's just common sense. Punctuality, that's just common sense. Those are values we can all share. And I said in the last stream, despite the rhetorical poison that the leftists decorate these charges with by slathering on the white supremacy term, that they're not wrong. That they're not wrong. Meaning that punctuality, as ridiculous as this may seem, is very much a white value. And in the same way that you can't expect to pluck people up from around the world and drop them into a white country and have them instantly adopt the form of government and the culture and everything else, that things as simple as punctuality are a part of that. And so when the left says punctuality is white supremacy, and so therefore we must get rid of it, the response shouldn't be, oh, you're being ridiculous. Everything's white supremacy with you people. No, you need to lean into it. Lean into it. And clarify their language, because their language is dishonest. And say, yeah, actually, it is a white value. And it's a white value that we want to preserve. I mean, what's all this about anyway, if it's not about preserving white values? So let's talk about, well, let me bring up, because they get really, I mean, look, I'm not making this up. The left has gotten actually very autistic about this shit. Let me bring up an image here that has some very autistic definitions, anti-white definitions here. All right, so here we go. So there's like a whole hierarchy of white supremacy they want to get rid of. So number one is this is the gradient of how evil you are for being white, or really it's a gradient for what they want to fight, right? So number one is the white supremacist. White supremacist. Now, what is a white supremacist? Apparently, a white supremacist clearly marked white society that preserves, names, and values white superiority. See, this is already, it's extremely dishonest. And we're going to get into it further. But, well, you know what, let's just go through it, and then I'll address, because the rest of this is mostly bullshit. The rest of this is just to go after people that, like, so for example, number one, white supremacists. So people like you and me, that's what that's supposed to address, right? People that are not shy about saying, yeah, actually, I prefer living in a white country. And look, the rest of the world does too, or they wouldn't be showing up at our doorstep, right? So there shouldn't be anything controversial about saying that, but there is. And so that term is the rhetorical weapon they use against people like you and me. The second one is white voyeurism. Wouldn't challenge a white supremacist. Desires non-whiteness because it's interesting, pleasurable, seeks to control the consumption and appropriation of non-whiteness, fascination with culture, consuming black culture without the burden of blackness. So again, this is for people who also prefer to live in a white country, like I said, the whole world does. The only difference is they're kind of pussies, so they won't say it. This is the guy that's like, I have a black friend. I listen to Jay-Z. But at the end of the day, he would prefer to live in a white country. The next one, white privilege may critique supremacy, but a deep investment in questions of fairness, equality, under the normalization of whiteness and the white rule, sworn goal of diversity. So, okay, this is the even more of a pussy who, they'll say stuff like, they'll go beyond just saying like, oh, well, I've got a black friend, it's cool. No, they're the ones that are saying, maybe the cops, they are a little rough on the black people. It's that guy, right? But at the same time, he's like, he gets it. He's just too much of a pussy to ever vocalize that he gets it. And so he doesn't really push too hard. He's just trying to not be attacked by people like the person who wrote this. All right, next one up. We got white benefit. White benefit. Sympathetic to a set of issues, but only privately. Won't speak, act in solidarity publicly because benefiting through whiteness in public. Blah, 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 blah. All right, so just even more of a pussy. So this is the kind of person that is, if you get them at a party, or if they're just trying to bang some chick that they met on Tinder who has her pronouns in her profile, will totally throw white people under the bus. But still, on some level, just like the rest of the world who keep showing up, they kind of get it. They kind of, I don't know. I'd rather live in a white country than in Africa. So I don't know, but I'll talk shit because I'm that much of a pussy, and I just really probably am not that bright, so I lack the understanding of what I'm even saying. I'm just going along with. We're entering NPC territory at this point. All right, now we have white confessional. White confessional. Some exposure of whiteness takes place, but as a way of being accountable to POC, they seek validation from POC. So this is the guy that shows up to the BLM rally and, talks the talk, donates to all the right causes. But again, privately, really doesn't act that much different than any other white person. Doesn't live in black neighborhoods because, once again, like pretty much everybody, they'd rather live in a white neighborhood. White critical. Take on board critiques of whiteness and invest in exposing, marking the white regime, refuses to be complicit with the regime, whiteness, speaking back to whiteness. So this would be someone who goes beyond just taking Instagram photos at a BLM rally. And the funny thing, this is just like levels of race traitor. That's another way of looking at this. Just a gradient. And so this is maybe someone that actually, like an Antifa, like junior level of Antifa, I don't know. White traitor. This would be full on Antifa. Actively refuses complicity, names what's going on. Intention is to subvert white authority. And actually, that sounds like a tribe that's not even white, but well, whatever. And then finally, white abolitionists, like someone who just like almost like those transracial people that they hate white people so much they dress up like, I don't know, black people and all that stuff. Anyway, doesn't really matter. All this stuff's garbage. The first one, though, white supremacist. The reason that rhetoric is so powerful is not only does it mask what they're actually talking about, which is white primacy, not supremacy, it instantly delegitimizes white primacy because it implies that in order to believe in white primacy, which we'll define a little in more detail here in a second, that you believe that whites are better at everything. Whites are 100%, they're better at everything all the time. If you think, for example, what's a supreme being? Can you be better at chess than a supreme being? Can you be better at basketball than a supreme being? No. A supreme being is supreme. So the term white supremacist already is going to repel not just people who already don't like white people, but it's going to repel just thinking white people because they're going to easily be able to logic their way out of that term. They're going to say, well, I mean, come on. I prefer white communities, and I want to support my culture and all this, but I don't think we're just better at everything. And so the only people that cling to that label are the most delusional of pro-whites that actually really do, or at least say they do, think that whites are absolutely better at everything no matter what. Which is ridiculous. We're not. I mean, we wouldn't be in the situation if we were, right? We wouldn't have to have this conversation if we were. The NBA would be 100% white. I mean, we're just not. We're not better at every single thing, no matter what the situation or the circumstance. We're not. And that's what the term white supremacy or white supremacist implies. And so it's automatically rejected by any thinking person. Really what it means is white primacy. White primacy. And white primacy simply means that the people of white nations, white people, in those nations, their interests should come first. Their interests should be the objective of the society. In the same way that Japanese people's interests should be the focus of Japan. I mean, it's very simple. But because it's been mutilated into this hyperbolic supremacy term, it instantly repels people because it's false on its face. It's easy to say, well, this is a bullshit ideology. And it's funny because most people understand and agree with white primacy. They might not like that term, because even that term now, just because if you just attach white to anything, white has become such a knee-jerk, bad, reflexive thing that, the normies will hear white primacy and that'll freak them out too. But fundamentally, people would get on board with that. People understand it. And in fact, that's the way even these people, and I was thinking about this today, even these leftists who look at the future and they want it to be like Star Trek, or they want it to be like Star Wars, where they have all of these different planets, with all these different races coming together, working together. So it's like beyond globalism, right? This is like some kind of, universalism in a way, right? But even when they did these movies, I'm going to show you something. I'm going to make a point here. This is from, one of the shittier Star Wars movies. All right, so this is the Senate, right? This is the big Senate, where all the goofy aliens meet up and make decisions, and they all work together. But what do you notice about this image? Well, each one of these little hovering whatever the fuck things, they're separate, right? Each one of these little floating whatever things, they're homogeneous within those floating things. Why? Because it would be weird if the representatives of the Wookiees included like an Ewok and a human and a, one of whatever this thing is, This is the globalism that most people are comfortable with. Most people are comfortable with a form of globalism that just implies we have different nations of different people, and every once in a while we gather together and we negotiate different things like treaties and trade deals and this sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, we all go back to our home planets, our homogeneous home planets. Because it would be, as I said, it'd be ridiculous if the representatives of Endor, the Ewok planet, included non-Ewoks. It'd be weird if the president of the Wookiees was a human. And in fact, it would be weird just simply, let's not even take it to the realm of Star Wars. It'd be weird if the president of Japan was black or white or Mexican. See, the problem is white countries have lost their primacy. I shared a story on Telegram. This is another example of it. I'll bring it up here eventually. Here we are. This is just one of many examples. This kind of thing goes on all the time. It's not like a big shocker. Woke teachers want Shakespeare cut from the curriculum. This is about, again, white supremacy. And like I've been saying, that they're not wrong. They're not wrong. I mean, they're using the wrong term, but they're not wrong. Now, what I said on Telegram was, remember what I said about white supremacy. Really, the correct term, stripped of the leftist rhetorical poison, would be white primacy. Expecting the invaders to resonate with literature written by your ancestors is the same as expecting your value system and ideal form of government, etc., to work likewise. Fact is, Shakespeare is foreign and unrelatable to them on a biological level, and imposing it on them is asserting white primacy. what is happening now in white countries is what happens when whites fail to fight the infection for so long that they lose primacy and become the infection. Deceitfully mislabeling white primacy as white supremacy is how they discourage whites from defending their due primacy in their homelands. Their due primacy. And once again, everyone knows that people should have a right to self-determination. In a white country or in a Japanese country, it doesn't matter. People, genetic tribes, if you will, should have the right to determine their future. But now you got to think about this example here with the Shakespeare thing. In the same way that you can't expect a group that consists of people with an average IQ of 80, you can't expect them to perform at the same level as a people with a average IQ of, say, 100. And in fact, if that society, this hypothetical society, was designed by the people with the IQ of 100 to service and to preserve and protect the people with an IQ of 100, almost certainly the people with an IQ of 80 are going to fail. And no amount of Thomas Sowell's are ever going to change that. And in the same way, these same people, in the same way that they're not designed to prosper, to succeed, really maybe even to be happy in this society that wasn't designed for them, and in fact kind of keeps them at a disadvantage for their entire lives. Not because of anything hateful that the IQ 100 group is doing, but just simply because of the incompatibility. They're obviously not going to have an affection for the culture. So when people see these stories and they say, "Oh, that's crazy. Oh, everything's white supremacy." In fact, I tweeted this out or gabbed that out on Gab. I still don't know what they call it. Some guy was just like, because I basically said the exact same thing that I said on Telegram, that message I just read to you guys. And he said, "Well, wait, hold on. Why does it have to be white primacy? Why can't it just be human primacy?" Because white people made Shakespeare. That's why. Because white people made the West. That's why. Because what we're talking about is removing Shakespeare from the West. That's why. Because thinking like that is exactly why we have all these people who are incompatible with the system that's built, that's tailor-made for you and I. I mean, that's not hyperbole. It was literally designed for us. It was designed to be compatible with our hardware. And now we're being asked to uninstall all these programs because it's not compatible with everyone's hardware. And like I said, they're not wrong. They're not wrong to say this. they're just labeling it in a way that makes people uncomfortable. Because let's face let's talk about just the term primacy. Primacy means that you're not better than everyone, you're not dominating everyone, but that your needs come first, right? Primacy. That's all that means. So for people that are shying away from that term, if that's not what you want, what do you want then? What do you want? In fact, the people that shy away from that term, who fancy themselves on the right, that would be the I have a black friend tier of whiteness, whatever that fucking thing was called. A lot of that does come from a perversion of Christianity. It reminds me of, and I think a lot of people have had friends like this, maybe in grade school. It was always horrifying to hear as a child. But at least, I often had, there was always that one family. I mean, that maybe not every year, but this would happen occasionally. You'd just be like, fuck, sorry, dude. But you'd have that one friend or that one acquaintance, and you'd find out that, for Christmas this year, kids, we're going to learn about sacrifice and about how good we have it by taking all of the presents you would have got for Christmas and giving them to the poor. And as noble as that sounded to the parents, I'm sure, it really is a perversion of Christianity. Because it's the worship of self-flagellation, the worship of sacrifice. But you have a lot of those people on the so-called right that will sacrifice the needs of their own children to help randos. And those are the people who are most terrified of the term white supremacy. Anyway, I was just thinking about this at length as I saw more and more of these stories pop up where the left is pushing this white supremacy thing, where everything is white supremacy. And it reminds me of, think back about 10 years or so, where everything, instead of white supremacy, everything was racist. It's the same game. It's the same exact game. It's just that racists stopped working. So they just upped the ante. And just like when they were doing it with calling everyone a racist, if you opposed it, and then watching in glee as these fucking cowardly so-called right-wingers would be like, oh, I'm not a racist. You can do whatever you... Here, fuck my wife. I'm not racist. That's what they're doing with white supremacy. And it would have been better if back 10 years ago, when everything was racist, people had just said, you know what? Fuck it. Yeah. You're right. I guess I am. If your definition of racism is not wanting to have laws on the books that disenfranchise my race, then yeah, I guess I'm a racist. That would have been better. That would have been better than running and hiding because you didn't want to be called a racist. And that is why China is taking over. Because they don't have that baggage. And part of it is because they don't have that perverted version of Christianity. You know, all these people, and look, it really is not helpful, and I hate it when you see oh, Christ cuck. Look, you're never gonna look. Let's just be pragmatic for a second. You're not gonna get rid of Christianity, okay? And the majority of the people on your side are Christians. So when you say Christ cuck, you're accomplishing nothing. You're accomplishing nothing. In fact, if anything, you're making it worse for you. You're getting rid of allies. And you're causing division. But it's okay. It's okay to diplomatically and intellectually honestly talk about the problems with some of the Christians. That's okay. But running around screaming Christ cuck is just retarded. And Christians need to recognize too, and like I said, this doesn't affect all Christians, but there are a significant number of Christians. I mean, look, just tonight, when I was getting ready and making my coffee and everything, I was listening to ham radio, as I am known to do. And I just turned it off because I just turned it on, and I lasted like 30 seconds of this boomer talking about we're all God's children, like that fucking line. I fucking hate that line. We're all God's children. Well, I'm pretty sure God created dogs too. It doesn't mean I want to elect one president. Just because we're all God's creation doesn't mean we're all exactly the same. In fact, that's a little communist. It's a little bit communist. We're all God's children. It's kind of a communist, it's cloaked in Christianity, but it's a little communist there. And look, Christianity, at no point, at least not until modern times, it's not like the Bible doesn't talk about race. Holy shit, it talks about race. It's always talking about race. Not only that, God is literally making different promises to different races. But we're all God's children. Okay. Doesn't mean that we're all the same. God's literally making different deals with different races. In the Christian Bible. God's cursing races and blessing other races. How does that work out in your we're all God's children scenario? It's very frustrating. It's even more maddening because you hear it from in my example about the ham radio thing. You hear it from the mouths of some rich fucking boomer guy, and you're just like, you motherfucker, you are the reason, and you're not even gonna have the decency to stay alive long enough to see where this goes. You motherfucker. But that's the problem, is it's In his mind, he can't differentiate between primacy and supremacy. People like that, that's really what he's saying. I mean, if you were to really press him on it, what he's really trying to say is that no one group is supreme, really. And look, like I said, that's clear, that's evident to everyone. Except for the most extreme people. Deluded people. No one race is better at everything. Almost nobody is saying that. But if that's how you frame primacy, it's easy to get people who, one of the things that they are perhaps supreme in, empathy, it makes them feel like, oh no, I can't defend my people, because that implies somehow I think that we're better than all of every other group and that we should be ruling over them and maybe enslaving them. You know, speaking of which, here's the funny thing. We talked about the Star Wars example. When Star Wars does do multiculturalism, right? Like, so in the Senate, you have all these different, separate races and their own little floating things, and they all have a vote, and they all get together. At the end of the day, they go back to their planet. And then the handful of planets that aren't homogeneous, what do you notice about those planets? You know, like this planet, the multicultural planets. They're shitholes. They're all fucking shitholes, every last one of them, right? It's like slavery, gambling, warlords. Think about it. In the Star Wars universe, all the multicultural planets are complete shitholes that are run by warlords and are riddled with crime. Because people get it. People know this. Instinctually, they know this. They don't want to be Brazil. They want to be a family with shared goals. You know, this denial of biology is really going to be the end of us. Possibly quite literally. All right. So let's take a look at chat. See how you guys are doing tonight. I really just wanted to get that into people's heads, that it's okay to be a white primacist, I guess, if you want to call it that, in a white country, in the context of a white country, right? Just as it's okay, like if you're in India, they should be Indian primacists. It would be weird if India had like a white president. Anyway, you guys all get it. Let me take a look here. Why do you think we can play these linguistic frame games with 80 IQ people? Why do you think we can play these? I don't know what you mean. I'm not saying that we play any linguistic games. I'm saying that we, like I said, we lean into it. It would have been so much better if when they were saying everything that is part of your culture that they wanted to destroy was racist, instead of like running the other way, screaming, I'm not racist, I have a black friend. It would have been so much better if you just said, if that's your definition of racist, then I guess I'm racist. So what? You don't have to come up with a fancier word, right? Well, first of all, here's the thing. A lot of people talk about how the right is aimless. You know, they don't have like any real goals or whatever. And that's why they kind of have this bad habit of latching on to people like Trump or whatever, just like a strong man that's going to lead them or whatever, even though there's no real, because there's not like a solid foundation, right? And really, I think there is. It's just that most people are ashamed or embarrassed to say it. And that foundation is white primacy in white countries, right? I don't mean that we go to other countries and that like our needs are still, you know what I mean? Like it's different than supremacy. I don't want to be an empire. I don't want to be going around taking over other countries. I don't want to be telling other countries what to do. I don't want to be controlling them with foreign aid. None of that shit. I just want to have a homeland. And in fact, I suspect most white people in America would feel a lot less panicked about what's happening demographically in America if there was like a home base, right? Like if the same thing wasn't happening in every white country, right? If there was like a fallback position, right? So let's just say history, let's do like a fictional history. Let's just say somehow in this fictional history, India had colonized, and maybe they have like some place I just don't know about, but let's just say they colonized Cuba, just whatever, just go with it. And so Indians colonize Cuba, they make like a little India inside of Cuba, and maybe even just like with America, they get independence from India, right? And then people start moving in and demographically replacing them. And, it gets to a point where they're only, say, 50% of Cuba. Okay. As much as I'm sure the Indian people in Cuba would not like that, I don't think that they would feel an existential threat so long as they had India, this giant fucking, billions of people subcontinent that they could go back to if they were getting demographically replaced somewhere else, right? But this attack on whites in white countries, it's not limited to countries that I think the argument's weak, but you can at least make the argument, well, you weren't the first ones here in America, right? People are just doing to you what you did to the Indians or whatever, right? I don't think the panic or the existential threat would exist in so many people's hearts and minds if they thought, okay, well, I guess if it really gets shitty here, I can always go to the UK. I can always go to Germany. I can always go to France or, whatever. I can go back to wherever my lineage takes me. That doesn't exist. It's happening simultaneously in every white country. And so your only choice, really, is to either say, look, our interests as a people matter. And I do not want to be replaced. I want to have at least a home base somewhere. I mean, fuck, they talk shit about white people coming here and replacing the Indians. We gave them reservations. Are they going to give us reservations? I'd settle for that. Fuck yeah. If they gave us just in this, like if you look at any reservations, they're literally their own countries. It's the Navajo Nation. And they negotiate treaties with the federal government. I mean, they're sovereign nations in a way, like they're quasi nations. We're not going to get reservations. people would be ecstatic. And if we did, people would try to move there too. You know what I mean? So anyway, let's take a look here. There's a word for what they're calling white supremacy. Definition of Eurocentric, centered on Europe or Europeans, reflecting a tendency to interpret the world in terms of European. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, that's rolled into it, right? Basically, they're just saying white. You know, it's not white supremacy, it's just white. You know, like if but like I said, primacy. In your country, look, in the Navajo Nation, they should have Navajo primacy. And they do. In fact, I can't even go and own land in the Navajo Nation. It's illegal. It's an ethno-state. It's every single Indian reservation in the United States is an ethno-state. People saying that, like, oh, you can't have an ethno-state. We got them in America. You don't even have to look at Israel. We have ethno-states all over the place. And they DNA test you and everything. Like, it's 100% an ethno-state. But that's the kind of thing that you get when you're conquered by a people that has a high level of empathy. And that is not the treatment that same people will get when they are conquered. Why? Because guess what? According to this logic, that level of empathy is what? That's right. White supremacy. Giving the people that you conquered their own ethno-states is white supremacy. It is. Who else did that? Look around the world. Who else has done that? The people replacing whites in this country will not be so kind when they conquer this land. Would you consider it a good idea for Americans and Australians, etc., to move back to Europe to fall back home base? No, because it's, like I said, it's happening everywhere. And we wouldn't be welcome. Because in place, like, okay, so my family, right? We are mostly Scottish, British, you know, we're Anglos. We wouldn't be welcome. We wouldn't be welcome back there. That's the thing, is white primacy has been lost in pretty much every white country. There's maybe a few, but really not really. Certainly not in the Anglosphere. You know, maybe some Slavic countries, nominally, but that's shifting really fast because of their desire to be in the EU. And so they wouldn't let you. I mean, look at this. Well, South Africa, right? The South African farmers. It's not like European countries were welcoming those people in with open arms. I think Russia, again, the Slavs. I don't know 100% what the details of that, but I think Russia did bring in some of the farmers. America wouldn't even do it. You know, Trump, I think, tweeted it out once. And then that was it. Like everything, you know, Trump, oh, base Trump, he tweeted this cool thing, and then nothing happens, right? So it's just not a viable strategy. Like I said, that's part of the problem. That's why that existential threat exists. That's why the panic. That's why the confusion. That's why, in fact, the growing number of people who are biologically speaking not very ethnocentric, that's what's driving the ethnocentrism, is knowing, well, there's nowhere else to go. You know, you either defend your ethnicity where you are, or you know, that's it. Is America necessarily the best place to be? I don't know. I feel like I'm wedded to this land. I sometimes feel like it would be an easier thing to just, you know, go somewhere else. And look, my ancestors apparently did that at one point, right? So I don't think there'd be any shame in that necessarily, but it just, I don't know. I kind of feel like circumstances were different, you know. My family came here when there wasn't a country. They came here for the frontier. And if there was some new frontier, don't say space. You know, I'd be all about that. I would. I mean, look, in a way, that's kind of what I'm doing out here in the desert, right? I'm out here because no one else is. I'm out here settling this part of the world. If there was a place to do that, I don't know. Maybe that would be absolutely probably yeah, that would probably create a migration movement. Honestly, you'd have a bunch of people hopping onto, you know, just like when the New World, right? Let's get on the boats, or I guess now it'd probably planes. We'll go to wherever. People saying Antarctica. Yeah, I'd go to, if they would let you. You know, as crazy as that sounds, I think technology has caught up enough to where it would suck. You know, like in a lot of ways, it'd be like living on the fucking moon, right? Like you're not going outside most of the time, if ever. And so you'd be living indoors. You'd be living in a fucking space station, essentially. So, but yeah, you can't do that. Let's take a look here. Inside the Hollow Earth, yes. Someone asked if I like David Duke. I'll tell you what. I think he's one of the most demonized Americans in history. And I can't speak to everything he's said or done or anything like that, but I grew up associating that name with like the devil, basically, because that's the way it was used in political conversations. Like that was like, well, it was like saying like Hitler. Oh, you're like David Duke. Yeah, it was synonymous with Hitler. And I saw him, I think on some streams with JF for the first time. That was my first real exposure to him as like an adult. And he sounded rather like a normal guy, like surprisingly not crazy or you know, this version of him that I'd grown up hearing about didn't seem to exist. And I decided after watching, I think it was, like I said, I think it was a stream with JF or something, to go back and look at his like television appearances from like the 80s. And he was on, there was one in particular I watched where it wasn't Geraldo. What's the gray-haired guy? It was like a show out of Chicago or something. Donahue. He was on Donahue in the 80s, and there was it's on YouTube, or at least it was. Maybe they took it down. And I was like, all right, let me watch this, because this is like when supposedly he was like the devil, right? Like this is the 80s version of him. So maybe he's like way crazier in the 80s, and that's why everyone was saying he was the devil or whatever. And I went back and watched it, and it was infuriating because it was a character assassination of what seemed to be like a fairly reasonable guy. Like, he didn't seem to have changed much from when I saw him on JF. The difference was, in the 80s, people were not too savvy when it came to media tricks. You know, that's why so many of these shows sprung up. Now, if you notice, I mean, luckily people kind of wised up, so it's not so blatant. But you know, you had this flurry of shows like this, right, where you just have some super dishonest ringmaster. Like, it wasn't even like a talk show host. That's what they called him, but he was a ringmaster. It was a fucking circus. Like, you had Jerry Springer. It was like an extreme version, but like you had Montel Williams, you had Ricky Lake, you know, you had Donahue, you had Maury Povich, like all these dishonest ringmasters. And it was a circus. And it was like before there was Twitter, right? It was using the same tactics that you see on Twitter, just on in front of a live audience. So instead of saying the thing that's going to generate the most outrage retweets, it was saying the most hyperbolic thing that would generate the most outrage from the live audience. Yeah, and didn't matter if it was like, just like on Twitter, didn't matter if it was 100% dishonest. Didn't matter, in fact, if it was slanderous or libelous or any of that stuff. They were the ringmaster. They were there just to, they were provocateurs. They were there to both provoke the audience and give them a sense of outrage, but also, ultimately, if possible, provoke the guest. Make them do something stupid. You know, humiliate them. I mean, that's basically what Twitter has taken over that role. You know, before there was Twitter, and it was only one way, people would tune in to these shows where you had the ringmaster that would just, all they would do is generate moral outrage to a vast, stupid audience. I mean, it was literally Twitter. And the difference is, I guess, well, it's not too different now, is the guest wouldn't have the same opportunity to really respond. So, like, in the case of David Duke's appearance on the Donahue show, like, it's hard for him to respond to shit when the entire studio audience is going boo, 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 like, you know, like, and shouting over him. You know, in the same way that again, it's like Twitter, right? It's hard for you to respond to shit when they shadow ban you or just outright ban you. And then boost all of the other tweets. So yeah, I don't. Again, I haven't studied him, or I've never listened to his show. I know he's got, or at least I think he has a show. My exposure to him has been fairly limited. In fact, I was on a stream with him, I think, at one point with JF. Like, it was a Christmas stream or something like that. And again, he seemed fairly like a reasonable, likable guy, and nothing that he has said that I've heard really is all that inflammatory, even. So maybe he was different when he was way younger. I have no way of knowing. But like I said, in the 80s, at least, when I saw him on Donahue, he didn't seem irrational or crazy or hateful or any of those things. you got to remember this fake news thing. It's not new. It's been going on a really long time. It's just that most people didn't have a means of exposing that. You know, there was no internet. So when people like my parents, for example, would talk about the evil David Duke, they just didn't, they didn't know what they were talking about. They were responding in the same way that when you watch a sitcom, and I did this whole video on applause, right? Where if you're watching a sitcom, especially, I don't know that they don't do it so much now, but like you watch a sitcom and they put in fake laughter after the bad jokes. Because it tells the stupid people, oh, the joke happened. I need to laugh now. Because it's self-preservation. They need to fit into the group because they're not smart enough or capable enough to survive on their own. So especially when you're like a stupid person, you need to conform to the crowd. You don't want to be the one that's not laughing at what everyone else is laughing at. Last thing you want to do is stick out if you're a stupid person. But just generally speaking, most people, that's the way. Most people don't have whatever it is that makes me not give a shit about that. Most people don't have that. And including my parents, right? So when my parents would hear the crowd in the audience of the Donahue show going, boo, boo, David Duke's the devil, boo, boo. They wanted to conform to that. That was imprinting on them that there's a consensus. Our society has a consensus that, you know, the science is in. The science says that David Duke is the devil. And so you must conform to this idea or you're jeopardizing your survival because you're going against the group. And that's, by the way, that's why that's the same. Twitter operates under the same principle. And well, you could say all social media. There's a reason why else do they manipulate likes and upvotes and, you know, whatever. Everything it's a different version of applause. And so if you have an idea that you're pushing and it has not the kind of applause that you want, you have to artificially alter that because that's influential, unfortunately. It's like the polls that they do, right? The fake polls that don't tell you what voters think, but what they want voters to think. Because people will hear, oh, apparently there's a consent, because again, most people are just fucking going with the flow. And if they find out that, oh, you know, according to this poll, you know, global warming is real, so I better believe in it because I don't want to be the guy that's going against the grain. I'm not smart enough and capable enough to be doing that. I'll put myself in danger. And look, in a way, they're right. When I talk about how, like, okay, so all those people, not all of them, but okay, some of the people that look at what I'm doing just for, like, you know, in terms of living out in the desert and not partaking of, you know, not participating in usury, you know, not going around and eating at 5-star restaurants or any star restaurants, really. Restaurants. And they see this and they're like, oh, that, you know, you're living like a poor person. That just seems so icky or whatever. It's a lot of those people, it's because they couldn't do it. They have to conform. Like, it works both ways. Like, in the past, I've really focused, because this is how it applies to me. But I often forget how it's different for other people. But I've often pointed out that, like, look, if you position your life in such a way that you can be deplatformed and you can be, whether it's from banks or whatever, and you're able to speak your mind. You have no, and in fact, if you can break away from the system entirely, you don't have that weird fear in the back of your mind that, like, well, if the system were to go down, I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and I could potentially starve to death. Like I think of it in terms of like, okay, if I can position my life in such a way that I'm immune to these sorts of things, I can operate freely and not have all these little things hanging over my head. But it works the other way too, where there's people that just, they wouldn't be able to do it. And they know that that's what you'd have to do to speak freely. So the last thing they want to do is speak freely, because they wouldn't be able to do it. And it's not that hard, guys. But a lot of people wouldn't be able to do it. A lot of people survive on the system, even people that think they don't. It's like a methadone drip. So let me take a look here at chat. How could one get this message of white primacy through to the classes obsessed with media screaming the opposite? It's well, look, you're asking the wrong guy, because I'm Blackpilled. I think that, the time for arguments is over. But like I said, you need to live your life in such a way that you can lean into it. And it's going to take, it can't just be me talking on a live stream about this stuff. It's got to be everybody talking to everyone all the time. But even then, I just think that's unrealistic. That's not what's going to happen. So, really, I mean, it's, in some ways, it's more of a save who you can in your personal life, red pill, I guess, whatever you want to say. But there's not going to be, there's not going to be this massive movement where all of a sudden a country that's now quite possibly less than 50% white, in terms of, talking about America here, all of a sudden they're like, you know what? I miss those times when white people were in charge of everything, and culture was white centric, all the characters and movies were white and stuff like. I miss that. Let's go back to that. No, that's not going to happen. That's literally never going to happen. It's not going to happen. So no matter what you do, no matter what anyone does. In fact, that the reason that's not going to happen is white primacy is out. It's gone already. This is the kind of thing where it's like, as your house is burning to the ground, saying, do you think we should buy fire insurance? It's like, well, you can't now. It's, house is on fire. I don't think they're gonna let you make a policy with this going on here. But again, like, it's all right. It's okay. You can still be happy. And by the way, look, I know there's lots of people that aren't, or I don't know about lots, but I know there's people that listen to my stuff that aren't white that get this. In fact, maybe they came to a white country, or maybe, I don't know if they are in a white, but let's just say that they did because they got it, or their family got it, or someone got it, right? Someone down the line got it. But it still doesn't matter. You got to zoom the graph out. In fact, tonight's secret message, which is a different message than the kind I've been sending. It'll be a different process to decode this secret message. But it 100% illustrates. In fact, it's so good, even though it's a secret message tonight, I might have to bring it up another time. But it's a zoom out of the graph. Over 100 years. It's like 150 year out. Zoom out of the graph. And if you decode that message and see that message, and then just think of it, and that's where we used to be at 150 years ago. Where I don't know, remember precisely. It might be slightly more than that. You'll get why you can't pull out of this nosedive. I mean, just as an example, I mean, just the fact that, like we've talked about, you can't be on. Well, look, you'll have to decode the secret message. I don't want to give it away. Yeah, like I said, it's such a good point, though. I'll bring it up another stream. But for right now, it's the secret message. And I'll play that at the end of the stream. And like I said, it's going to be a little different, so don't expect the previous methods to work. That's the best I can do with that. All right, let's take a look here. Tucker said tonight, 30 plus million illegals are here. Or I think that's what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, look, it could be more. I don't know. I'm sure someone knows, but I know it's more than what the official number is. Like they've been saying like 11 million for like 25 years. 30 million, even that seems a little light. But maybe it's 30 million. Yeah, someone said reverting to everything white, if that was even possible, would take longer than even our lifetime. Yeah, it's not possible. The only way that's possible is like if there was a place new to go, and there's nowhere new to go. There's just simply nowhere new to go. And it's already, America's multicultural, at least for the rest of your life. Even if there's, you got to think of it this way, even if there's like a secession movement and stuff like that, that'd be better. At the very least, you would have states that are less communist and maybe less woke that you could move to in a situation like that. But even then, you're not going to have like, and there's the white state. It is what it is. Maybe Europe will freak out, but I think I don't know. I don't live in Europe, so it's harder for me to judge what the trajectory of Europe is going to be. But America it's pretty easy to see, I think, at this point. I guess someone's talking about Scientology. Yeah, unless we go to Antarctica. Too bad, won't happen. Idaho is pretty white. Yeah. I mean, look, it is what it is. You can go to places that are whiter, I guess. Do you know who was the first person to use the word race and or racism? What was it, Trotsky? Well, no, race has been used for a long time, or at least, like I said, even in the Bible, God's talking about different races. Maybe they called it something else or whatever, but I mean, the concept of race has been around since the beginning of time. Everyone's understood race until, recently, I guess. No one, all of a sudden, now it's like this really complicated thing that no one understands. But the giving it a name and using maybe the term racism might be I don't know 100%, but that I could see that being a communist thing, just because you're essentially in the same way like what the left does now, right? They find something that's just part of common sense, and then they attach like some label to it. to get rid of it. You know, okay, perfect example. Homophobia. That's a new term. And really all it is, it's just describing the natural phenomenon that takes place when straight dudes see gay guys kiss and get grossed out. That's been a natural response to faggotry for centuries. But because the left doesn't like it, they give it some clinical name, like homophobia or racism or whatever. Take your pick. That's the thing. They give it some scientific sounding name. They pathologize it. And then they attack it. Yeah, but I'll tell you one thing. Something you can learn from that, because the right, sadly, does often they get, like in this case, they get in the habit of just adopting the language of the left and never actually coming up with their own terms. And when they do, it's very successful. Like I think SJW would be I mean, obviously it's tired now, but like when that was a term the right came up with, right? And it stuck because it accurately described a type of person in a derogatory but accurate way. And so it stuck and it worked. But the right it's not very often they do that. And it's a shame because, you know, like when I was first starting to get into animation and art and stuff like that, I bought a bunch of just random design books because I was doing a lot of, you know, motion graphics and stuff like that. And I never went to art school. I was self-taught and I knew how to use the software, but I didn't understand the design aspect of things. So there wasn't as much shit about that on YouTube. And so I just bought a bunch of design books. And I was reading this one design book, and in the preface, the author said that one of the important things about design and art and understanding it and some of the complexities and theories and stuff like that is being able to put a name to things. And because there's a lot of things that you'll see like in a movie, right? Like maybe there's a cinematic trick that they'll always do in a film, right? Or just here's something everyone knows. A jump cut. Everyone knows what a jump cut is, right? Or most people know what a jump cut is because of YouTube, right? Because that was almost all of YouTube was jump cuts for a while. And if you know what a jump cut is, if you know what to call it, you can now use it more effectively and understand why you would use it or why you might not want to use it. But you have to have a name for it. Otherwise, you're just watching the video and then a jump cut happens and you're just like, oh, that was a little jarring. You know, I don't know why. And I can, obviously I saw what happened, but I don't know what that's called. It's just, I'm having an emotional response to this, but I don't have like a name for it. So I can't really use it. I can't clinically, look at it and understand it because I don't have a name for it. And so a lot of, in my, learning about filmmaking even, was you just learning what things are called. And then once you know what they're called, you can understand, you can use, it's like, think about the financial world, all the different weird jargon they use. And because it's like a whole other language, most people, it's like a barrier. It keeps people out because you have to know the language. Anyway, one of the reasons, or one of the examples the author gave in that design book was, she said she was driving around and she saw like a weird tree. And she said, I don't know what this tree is. And so she looked it up, and it was a Joshua tree. You know, those weird looking, Dr. Seuss looking yucca plants, right? And she said, oh, well, now I know what a Joshua tree is. And I think she lived in Southern California, just based on what she wrote. Because she said, oh, then all of a sudden I started seeing Joshua trees all over the place. Everywhere I looked, there was fucking Joshua trees. Because she knew what it was. You know, before it was just like background noise, but she knew what it was now. I think a better example of this, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, a car that I got just out of necessity. I needed a car. And the car that I could get was a Chevy Cavalier. Like one of the most unsexy cars in the world. Just a plain old, looks like every other fucking car in the world, Chevy Cavalier. And once I had a Chevy Cavalier, and I drove a Chevy Cavalier to work every day, I saw fucking Chevy Cavaliers everywhere. Everywhere I looked, there was another Chevy Cavalier. I never in my life, once, even though there was just as many Chevy Cavaliers driving around on the road before I drove one, never once noticed a Chevy Cavalier. Because it looks like every other stupid, shit sedan made in America. But once I had one and I was more familiar with with that particular shit car, I saw them everywhere. In fact, sometimes I thought it was my car. And so I think that one of the problems that the right falls into is a lot of certainly for the vast majority of the rank and file so-called right, and I'm being big tent right here with this statement, okay? A lot of these people, they're just going off intuition. They're just going off instinct. They're going off their gut. They lack the terminology to really articulate what it is they're feeling. They lack the vocabulary to really describe their enemies, and which prevents them from understanding their enemies. And in fact, if they even have a political vocabulary, much of it has been defined by a leftist. Racism, someone said earlier. Perfect example. That's not a term that right-wing people came up with, but it's a term that right-wing people have to deal with all the time. And when you ask someone to define racism, how they define it, they define it the way that a leftist would, because it's a leftist term. The handful of terms that the right wing has come up with, like I said, even though it's dated now, because it was really more of a slur than a technical term. The SJW thing. You could ask someone on the left to define that. They might get angry, but they would be forced to define it in the terms that right-wing people mean it, because it was very specific. And it was created and defined by the right. So, like, really what this all circles back to, this is why it's so important that we are not led around by the left's terms like white supremacy, but we don't allow, that doesn't mean that we run away from what it is they're talking about when they call it white supremacy. Because they're not just making something up. Like I said, they are addressing a real grievance that they have. I mean, I'm not talking about I'm not saying it's a just grievance, but it's a real problem. They do have it. Look, like I said before, how would you feel if I picked you up and let's say you have an IQ, let's say you're above average, let's say you're at like a 120 IQ, and I dropped you into a society of hyper advanced 200 IQ people. You'd probably have a big problem with a lot of the shit they do because you'd be at a constant disadvantage. And so there's things that you'd want to undermine and destroy if you wanted a piece of that pie. Otherwise, you would just always get the shit end of the stick because you couldn't compete in a society of 200 IQ people that was designed for 200 IQ people. And look, it's not just IQ. That's just one of the more tangible, measurable aspects that most people don't have a disagreement. It's way more complicated than that, but that's just one metric that we can talk about that's easy for people to grasp. So when they say blah 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 is white supremacy, they're describing a real problem that they want a real solution to, and they're just using rhetorical tricks to prevent you from defending their dismantling of that thing. So in the case of the Shakespeare, right? That is a real problem. If I was a black kid in public school, probably would have a hard time grasping Shakespeare for a variety of reasons. And look, you could even say it's as simple as look, you just have Shakespeare's just not, it's not easy reading, right? For even like white kids, right? But you're going to have a little more of your heart's going to go into it if you feel a genetic connection to the author. If you view it as a part of your heritage, you can see the value in preserving it. If you understand that for generations, your family tree has loved and respected and preserved and passed down this fiction written by Shakespeare, that there must be some kind of value to you and to your children. Why would you feel that way if you were some black kid in a public school somewhere? Really? Like, why would you give a shit about Shakespeare? And the only reason, if we're being just, like I said, we just have to be honest. Don't run away from this. Lean into it. The only reason it's being taught in that school in the first place is because when that curriculum was designed, it was designed for us, by us. It was designed in the context of white primacy. Right? It was designed by white people for white kids. So what they're saying is not wrong. I mean, they're just painting it to make it sound dirty. But it's not wrong. And by acting as if they don't have a I don't want to say valid, but like acting as if that they're acting as though they're just saying something crazy is running away from a confrontation that you're afraid to have. And that is a confrontation that's going to put you in a position where you're going to have to defend white primacy, because that's the only defense for Shakespeare in public schools in a country without white primacy. Why would you have Shakespeare? Why wouldn't you have other authors? And look, you might say, well, Shakespeare is clearly superior, like that guy on Gab, like, well, Shakespeare is that's human primacy. Shakespeare is just clearly superior. To you, it is. That black kid doesn't give a fuck about Shakespeare. He doesn't care about fucking opera. Bagpipes. This stuff that speaks to you doesn't speak to other people. And you need to acknowledge that and say, yes. Yeah, that's precisely why this is in the curriculum. And that's why I'm going to defend it being in the curriculum. If you want to call it white supremacy, whatever. But if you just say, "Oh, you're just being crazy," you're ignoring. I mean, you're going to lose. That's what they did for 20, 30 years about racism. Like, "Oh, you're racist." No, I'm not a racist. When if you examined what they were talking about, you would see that not only did people run away because of the word racism, they ran away because they were too uncomfortable to defend whatever that thing, like affirmative action, right? Affirmative action is clearly anti-white. And that's like the whole point of it, right? It's the so-called systemic racism we keep hearing about, right? It's in the law. It's codified. And if you were to say that we shouldn't do this back in the 70s or 80s, they would call you a racist. Well, you're just a racist. You hate black people. And really, let's examine it the same way we looked at the Shakespeare. What the leftist was really saying is, look, black people can't compete on an even playing field. They need this. Our objective is to get fewer white people in power. And if it's an even playing field, that's never going to happen. They need this to compete. Now, they would articulate it in a way that made it sound like there was some big conspiracy to keep black people down, and that's why they needed it. But it doesn't change the fact that they were saying blacks need this to compete. And the right, and look, there was people that opposed it, obviously, but not in sufficient numbers. Because they didn't want to be called a racist, and they also didn't want to say, like, look, I know they can't compete. That's kind of the problem. They were afraid to say that. Because once again, they were ashamed of what their instincts, what their intuition was telling them. Yeah, you're right. They do need this to compete. That's kind of the problem. once again, the secret message. I almost want to share it with you guys. It's such a good, so relevant. I can't though. I can't. All right, let's take a look here at chat. The original reason given for affirmative action was because of the lower average IQ. This was acknowledged the beginning, then buried in subsequent decades. Excuse me. Oh yeah, there was. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at how open. Very prominent. Like I said, even Lincoln. I've talked about that before. Even Lincoln was very open about the fact that, like, oh no, the Emancipation Proclamation is in no way about giving black people the right to vote or having them live in white societies. Even, I support this. Lincoln saying this. I support Negro colonization is what he called it. Negro colonization, and what that meant was, like what happened in Liberia. He supported putting the freed slaves onto boats and sending them back to Africa to go colonize Africa. Probably, fund them to some extent. I don't know. That was Lincoln. Like this whole denial of the obvious, the uncomfortable obvious, is a relatively new thing. People on both sides of the aisle used to agree wholeheartedly with the idea that we're not all the same. It really wasn't until post-World War II. It really wasn't. And that's not just in the West. That's really anywhere in the world. In fact, many parts of the world are still... like people joke about how racist Chinese people are, right? Like how they just don't give a fuck. And they just say... They're not racist. They're just not bagged down. Or, I mean, they are, but like, you know what I mean? Like, they're just saying the truth. They're just saying the truth that you've been conditioned to not say. So when Chinese people, like from China, Chinese people, say things about white people or Jews or black people or whatever, like they just don't give a fuck, it's because they don't. They just don't have all this baggage. All right, let's take a look here. I lost an old friend for pointing out the truth about Lincoln. He called me a liar and hasn't spoken to me since. Well, there's records of this shit. It's not. Just send him the source. It's not hard to find, and it's not just Lincoln. Several northern presidents post-Civil War, after Lincoln, said essentially the exact same thing. Okay? This was not controversial when there was white primacy in America. Not even a little bit. It was literally like it was just the no-nonsense shit that, like, I was just talking about the Chinese people. That's how presidents and congressmen talked. And there's tons of records of it. It's not hard to find. So just show them that and be like, look, dude, it's literally how everyone talked until like 1940. I think that's just how it was. All right, let's take a look here. The differences you have pointed out are between those societies with money to paper over racial issues and those where life is difficult and nobody gives a fuck. Well, I mean, China's got money. They just also don't have all the Jewish-run propaganda that has been going in overdrive in America since World War II. They just don't. They There's like Hitler themed restaurants in China. You know, they don't give a fuck. There's no such thing as white guilt in China. You can talk about the Holocaust until you're blue in the face in China. They don't give a fuck. They'll say, yeah, actually, we killed 50 million of our own people not that long ago. No big deal. 6 million? Yeah. Add a zero. Wake me up when you add a zero. They don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about any of this shit. And neither would white people if they'd left their fucking TVs off. What do you mean Hitler restaurant? What I'm thinking of is actually Korea. I'll find it for you. There's more than one. There's more than one. Asian people love Hitler for some reason. Let's see here. I think it was in Korea. Pretty sure it's Korea. The one I'm thinking of. Yeah. There's a few of them. It's not just one. All right, I'm gonna save a few of these here. Oh wait, where'd that save to? Oh, wrong folder there. Stop bitching, computer. Just do what I say. Yeah, there's like a ton of places like this in Asia. Come on, computer. My computer just freaked out there for a second. All right. Yeah. Let's go to the Hitler bar. You guys want to go to the Hitler bar? Yay, Hitler bar. There's another one. Man, I'm starving. Let's go to Hitler's. Let's go to Hitler for coffee, beer, whiskey, and cocktails. That'd be good food. You guys want some wings? Let's go get some wings at Hitler's. Here's another one. I mean, they're all over the place. These are not hard to find. Oh, let's go to Hitler's Cross. You guys hungry? Who's hungry for some Hitler's Cross? You guys want to go to Hitler's Cross? There's another one. I can do this all day. Like, oh, look at this one. This one's got actual Hitler techno bar. Let's go to the Hitler techno bar. Oh, this is one of my favorites. This is one of my favorites. All right, man. I like KFC, but not as much as I like Hitler's chicken. Extra tasty, crispy. Yum, yum. Here's what the you want to know what the employees dress like at these places. Here's another one right here. This is why they say Asians are honorary. So, yeah, you know, like, they don't give a fuck. They have, you can yell at them about Hitler all day long. They'll just be like, all right, whatever. That's why China's overtaking the United States. Honestly, I mean, not to oversimplify it, but in a lot of ways, that's why. Because they don't give a fuck. They do not give a fuck. They don't suffer from this disease called white guilt. All right, here's one of a whole bunch of them. We've seen most of these already, but here we go. So if you're hungry for Hitler and you're not sure which one to go to, here's a few options. So yeah, they just don't give a fuck. They just don't give a fuck. So this whole thing about like shying away from wokeism, they don't have to worry about it. They don't give a fuck about it. They're not susceptible to it. And part of it too, look, part of it's probably biological, part of it's historical context, right? Part of it's it's not as simple as, oh, it's because of the Jewish propaganda. No, that's a piece of the puzzle. But part of it's also, I mean, obviously, like I said, the boomers' parents literally killed Nazis, you know? And part of it is the Christian stuff, right? The people, we're all God's children people, right? I mean, it's a very complicated thing, but it's most of those pieces don't apply in Asia. You know, they're not Christians, so they don't have the Zionist thing going on. You can't, if you're Jewish and you want to push your Holocaust education or whatever, you know, you can't blend in their societies like you can in a white society. So you don't have that thing going on. Plus, they run their own culture. You know, I talked about at length. You know, most Christmas songs that you know weren't written by Christians. White Christians have not run their own culture in at least 100 years. At least 100 years. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was not written by a Christian. If you haven't seen it yet, go to BitChute and look up my video, Rudolph the Jewish Reindeer. And you'll be a little surprised at how many fucking songs, Christmas songs, were written by Jews. But yeah, Asian countries don't have that problem. They also don't have the other white guilt stories, right? Here's the weird thing. White guilt is it's got to be a biological thing. It's a biological thing that we have to overcome as white people, because they use it against Americans, saying, you know, you conquered the Indians, you pushed them out. This isn't even your land, right? And so you have like that whole narrative that's transmitting guilt to white people in America. But you hear that same stupid shit, or like the stuff about slavery, thrown in the faces of Europeans who don't have that history. It's just, it was so effective against the white people in America, they're using it everywhere, and it works. Because there's something in white people that just, it's like I said, I think it's a pathological empathy that it's right now, it's kind of suicidal. So anyway, I'm going to have to take a real quick break here in a second, but I'm not going to just leave you with nothing. I'm see if maybe I can play something for you while I'm using the little boys' room. Oh, this is perfect. You guys will love this. All right, get ready. Enjoy.
Got the vaccine. You got the vaccine. They got the vaccine. We got the vaccine. We can get back to normal. Let me inform you. Let's all get the vaccine. It's about community immunity. I'm talking unity for you and me. If Doc says it's good, then trust me, it's good. Now let's all get the vaccine. Alright, there is none higher. DMC, I will inspire. Time for us to trust and not debate. The vaccine, believe it's safe to take. 9 out of 10 people won't get sick. That's 90% effective and legit. This COVID thing is real and it will find you. It's killing our people, let me remind you. Back in the days, there was polio, smallpox, back in the days. Measles and mumps, man, back in the days. But because of the vaccines, none of those days. Vaccines, they work to trigger immunity. 2 shots, we got antibody security. We gotta act now, no need to wait. Get your vaccine before it's too late, for real.
Apparently I didn't have it loop. Bet you guys are really upset about that. All right. So let's take a look at chat. So yeah, that was the hip and cool get your vaccine rap. Who all wants to get vaccinated now? Got the hip and cool vaccine rap. You guys excited about that? You feel enriched? Did I just enrich you? All right, let's take a look here. Lots of fans of that video in the chat. Get your vaccines. So, anyway. So yeah, honestly, I think that the Western supremacy, because in that case, in terms of historic, I'm not talking about primacy anymore. I'm talking about actual supremacy in terms of, well, maybe primacy would work with this too. But there was some supremacy going on when, with the British Empire and everything like that. But that era is gone. And I think what we're going to be experiencing probably in the next, really what's in store is Chinese supremacy. I think you're going to see really where it's going to tip over. And this is already happening. Is when the military, because that's really all America's got going for it right now, right? Our dollar's worth nothing. Our money's worth nothing. It's just that everyone's too afraid to say it. That's it. Everyone's too afraid to be like, hey, these dollars are kind of worth. Oh no, my country's, gone and I've got a bayonet up my ass. Everyone's just too scared to point out that the dollar is just fake and gay. And so all it's going to take is for China, most likely, to have a military that's not full of trannies. That's all it's going to take. China to have a military that not only is not full of trannies, but there's actually a sense of patriotism in the ranks. Everyone is genetically close to each other. They have a high level of in-group preference, high IQs, technologically advanced. Lots of money, lots of ability to build a military. And that's what's happening right now. And as that's happening, America's doing, they're just doing it's almost like they want it to happen. They're doing the exact opposite, right? What's America doing? It's like they're trying, we all saw the footage of the troops in DC. Not exactly, top of the line, right? Do I still have that picture? I hope I still have that picture. Because we'll have a good side by side. Yeah, all right. So here's the American military. There we go. There's the American military. And let me give you a little taste of what China's up to. Oh, my internet's so slow when I'm streaming. It's intolerably slow. Come on. There we go. This is good enough. This is not what I was looking for, but whatever. This will work. All right. So we got the military of America versus the military of China. You see where this is going? You see where this is headed? And once again, zoom out the graph. I don't mean just a little bit, like a lot. The British Empire once ruled, well, pretty much the world. And places like China, even, as an example, did what they were told. And if you look at the fall of at least with the Anglosphere, as just another, if you zoom the graph out enough in terms of primacy, you look at the dissolution of the British Empire. It's not hard to see where this is headed. Because that entire timeline, what was happening in China? Pretty much the exact opposite. So, this is what we're headed. This is where we're headed. I like our little yin yang patch. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? Or is that just like a, I don't know, like a glamour patch? The fact that there's even glamour patches. Someone said Oswald Mosley tried. Yeah. Lots of people tried. That's the thing is, that's another reason why I'm Blackpilled is when you zoom out the graph, you see these little, like the ups and downs in the graph. You see these little moments where it looks like maybe that we're, there's a chance. And then invariably what happens? The trend line keeps going. And so when you're zoomed in real close, you'll see these little moments where like when Trump got elected and everyone's like, oh, base Trump. Yeah, we're going to turn it around. 4 years later, look where we're at. That's what I've been trying to get through to people. Is this isn't like a even if you have little minor, what appear to be minor successes on the way down. All right, perfect example. If I kick you out of an airplane and your chute doesn't open or it falls off or something like that, you can move your arms around, maybe flap your arms or maybe use your jacket like a flying squirrel, like open it up and coast around a little bit. You can slow the fall. You're going to hit the ground though. Nothing you do will prevent you from hitting the ground. You can have fun on the way down. Doesn't mean you have to be sitting there screaming like a bitch the whole way down. But you're going to hit the ground. So it's just, like I said, you zoom the graph out enough, you see that. All right, let's take a look here. I grew up and was born on a military base. No, this isn't the Cold War anymore. We are not in a space and technology race. U.S. and the military in general are in a suicide race. Yeah, the military is a joke right now. And that incompetency that you see in the elite, like the journalistic elite, right? These retards on MSNBC and all that. That's same level. I mean, the leftists might have control over all the institutions, but it's a dysgenic it's a nepotistic control that's being steered by, in many instances, dysgenic people, and they're taking us all down with them. State-enforced butt sex has been in full swing for years, yet the LGBT crowd has been claiming that they have been targeted for extermination by whites. Blah, blah. Yeah, right. Well, it's always accuse your enemy of what it is you're doing, right? So if they say that they're getting exterminated, and there's some big evil plot to exterminate, what does that tell you? Remember when we went over some of the rules for radicals? That was a big one. Always accuse your enemy of that of what you're doing. You know, always project it. Because then if they turn around and say, no, you're the one doing it, it just sounds like they're saying, I know you are, but what am I? It takes all the steam out of it. That's why you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. But they're totally legit in saying that you want to round them all up and gas them all. Although increasingly, I mean... Oh, boy. All right, we're getting pretty close to where I'm going to play the secret message here and then bail. Any final... Anyone have any final thoughts or anything that we want to go over before I play the secret message? So yeah, someone said, or when people finally snap, they can say, I told you so. Do you have any suggestions for us Europeans in our situation? I mean, look, we have a lot of similarities. There's a lot of things that we have in common, obviously. A lot of the same methods are being used. Just the difference is the context, and also the fact that some of this stuff doesn't work as logically. I mean, maybe it works rhetorically, but if you're the native people of the country that's being whose people is being like when for example when you hear British prime ministers say that Britain is a nation of immigrants. I mean, that's just they're using American subversive rhetoric, but it's simply not true. So I don't know. I don't live in England. I don't know how that plays. You know, I don't know how. I don't know the context as well. You know, it's been I've never lived long term in Europe, so I would just say like I said, that anything you can. I think we're ahead of, in terms of the demographic shift. We're way ahead of Europe, right? Like, we're way more fucked. So if anything, maybe just use us as a warning. But I also don't know that I also don't know what your laws are. I know that you guys have hate speech laws in certain countries, and yeah, it's real hard for me to say. I wish I could help you out better. I come at this from, you know, an American point of view. If there's stuff that I'm saying that you guys can use and apply, then do that. But you know, you guys have your unique situations. Let's take a look here. Someone says Europe has a better legal ways to separate white areas. Yeah, I don't know. That's up to you guys. The one big thing you guys are fucked is the gun laws. I don't know how that's going to play out. Someone says Creator Studio is where you send your notification thing is bottom of the first. Yeah, but I'm on the app. It's not on the app anywhere. And I can't open up, like, I I don't have the web page open on my computer because I can't stream to myself as I'm streaming. I don't have the bandwidth for that. So I have the app open on another device that's on another internet because that's all I can do. And on the app, there's no notification anywhere. Do the opposition really hate white Christians, or is it a useful rhetoric and a way to understand their action? No, they really do hate us. Of course they hate us. That's why they're getting rid of us. They absolutely hate us. We're the infection. If your utopia, if your version of utopia is, well, I mean, we're kind of headed there, right? To there where they have trans kids everywhere and porn in everyone's pocket, and it's fair. They're normalizing bestiality at this point. I shared that on Telegram. There's that account on Twitter that's promoting bestiality. I mean, there's not just one. There's lots of them. They're going to normalize pedophilia at some point. Like, that's the only people that stand in the way, and they're not doing a very good job, is white Christians. So of course they hate you, because white Christians are the ones that are going to make you feel guilty for living in that fucking degenerate state. No one else is telling you that. And you know, if it wasn't the white Christians, like if you were doing the same push in like a Muslim country, they'd be going, it would be the Muslims that you would demonize. But it's just anyone that's going to stand in the way of your communist hellhole, and that's of course they hate us. Of course they hate us. All right, I'm getting a little tired. Sorry, guys. All right, I'm going to play the secret message. Like I said, it's totally different and has more information, that's why it's totally different, because I wanted to have more information. And it's a little longer, so you're going to have to turn down your headphones for a little bit longer if you are not decoding it. But stand by for the secret message.
Warning: if you are not authorized to receive this message, or if you are wearing headphones, you are advised to temporarily reduce the volume of this transmission. If this is a recording of a previous transmission, you may advance the timeline by approximately 2 minutes.
You have been chosen to receive a secret Blackpilled transmission. Stand by for secret pillbox message transmission. Transmission will commence in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Transmission begin. Transmission complete.
You got the vaccine, they got the vaccine, we got the vaccine. We can get back.
Oh God. So there you go. There's the new secret message, and you'll see why it's so relevant. It's literally it's zooming out the graph, and it's looking at the country the way that it used to. By the way, do slightly more research. Well, I can't say anything else. Just I'll probably spill the beans next stream. But just because it's so I found this thing that is in the secret message. I can't. I'm so tempted to just say what it is. I'm not going to do it. But I found it, and I found a lot of things like it, and I was a little bowled over by the amount of things like it that I found that I'm going to address in a future stream. Just to give you guys some context. Just to give you some context of what this country used to be like. And how people used to communicate with each other about important issues. All right, guys. So I'm going to go to sleep because I am really, really tired. I've been up all day fixing stuff. And I have a long day tomorrow of fixing more stuff in the storm. So if you guys are in the storm's path, try to stay warm, try to stay safe. Hopefully you've prepared at least a little bit. You've got some food, you've got a generator, whether it's solar or gas or something. Hopefully you watched my Civil War video I did like 3 fucking years ago, telling you everything to get, that if you did, you'll be totally fine, and this will just be not a big deal. And another reason to do prepping is not necessarily because of some end of the world scenario, but because you just might just get stuck in a storm for like a week or so. And you can be sitting there laughing at your neighbors who are freaking out because they don't have heat or food while you're just chilling and having a good time, making a party out of it. In the meantime, like I said, just it's time to stop. It's time to take the left seriously. Stop pretending like every complaint that they have is just like out of nowhere crazy talk. They're really talking about something that you should be defending most of the time. And they're just shaming you into not defending it or perplexing you into not defending it. But that's their whole game is not to actually fight you over the issues, but get you to not even defend it so they don't have to fight. So next time you hear that lefts call something white supremacy, that might sound like, oh, it's, there they go again, damn white people and their shuffles cards, that meme. No, that's the wrong way to look at this. Because they're right. When they make, sometimes it's a little ridiculous, but like most of the time, like in the case of that Shakespeare thing, they're right. It is a white thing. So just claim it and be like, yeah, that's why I want to keep it. There should be nothing wrong with me saying that. And yeah, so what? The left is hypocrites, or they let everyone else have a culture. So what? See, if you're not worried about, if you don't work for some globalist company with a tranny in HR, you don't have to worry about standing your ground on this shit and what repercussions might happen. So organize your life to where you can stand your ground. And with that, I'm going to leave you guys. Hope you have a good rest of your evening, day, or morning. For Blackpilled, I am, of course, Devon Stack.
A felon, gangster, mafiotic, negroidic, the Black Frank Gelada, a gangster judge, therefore unprosecutable, the blackish, menial, negroidic in appearance and demeanor, felon, vicious, parroting puppet, ex-district attorney, Nassau County, and watch my Frankenstein eyesight television playback of this felonious, lowly, sodomistic display by the felon, sodomist Judge William Sullivan and his lowly felon slut wife during my trial in Nassau County.